Are now live on the Woodrow Mercer YouTube channel. I'll share the link with you all afterwards so you can watch this back to your heart's content, which I'm sure you will. So thank you again for joining today. Some of you have been on some of these sessions before. For the ones who haven't, we're trying to encourage a kind of free-flowing discussion around this topic, and hopefully it's something that resonates with all of you. I've tried to keep this fairly broad and wanted to look at what we felt the differences were between testing and quality assurance. Certainly from my perspective as a recruiter in this area, these titles or these phrases are often interchangeable, and really I'm quite curious to find out what you feel are the key differences, perhaps providing a definition for both. And I'll go around to all of you individually to start off with that question of what the difference is between testing and quality assurance. The other questions that I've got, which I'm hoping we're going to tackle over the next 45 minutes or so, is are there scenarios where a business could employ both a test engineer and a QA engineer? Where does Agile come into this? And also something I've just been talking to Ian about before we've jumped on about analysis. I think hopefully will form part of this debate. So the job title test analyst previously was a very common one, but it seems to have been totally replaced with engineer now. So I'm just a little curious about that too and where that fits into this. So once again, thanks for joining. Hopefully we'll have a good debate, and if it's okay, I'm going to kick off with going to Rishi. And Rishi, if you want to just briefly introduce yourself and maybe give us your opinions on the difference between testing and quality assurance.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Rishi Davda. I currently work at a company called BHSS as a consultant. I work on various different clients, and I do various different roles. Some of them are kind of assurance focused, some of them are more testing focused. So what's my opinion on the difference? So my opinion on the difference is essentially assurance is more looking at the overall delivery of a product to the customer or the client, where testing is more of a process within that. So that's how I'd like to put it broadly. So yeah, looking at it from an assurance side of stuff, you're looking at what's the best way to describe this? It's quite a difficult topic to talk about sometimes. So from an assurance side of stuff, you kind of look at a process overall. So you look at kind of for example, say, is there an expected requirement? So, from a development side of stuff, so people are actually writing the code, is there a certain amount of lines per code that need to be written? Is from a testing perspective, is there a certain format of text that need to be written? Just a certain format we need to follow from a kind of testing standards perspective. And it's kind of looking at the user experience as well. So understanding the overall product and from a user experience perspective, where testing in general, well, from a test analyst perspective, you're looking more at the functional requirements. So understanding, does the system meet the kind of current specification that's been put in place? Does it work as intended? And looking at kind of bugs and trying to find issues trying to find issues with the system itself. So that's how I'd describe the difference between the two.
Okay, cheers for that, Rishi. Linford, do you want to go?
Sure. Hey, Matt. Hey, everybody. So my name's Linford Copeland. I'm from a QA and testing consultancy called Loop Testware. So maybe that's one to help debate on later. So I really liked your answer, Rishi. I think you covered a lot of the points that I would. I do think the words testing or the meaning of testing and quality assurance is interchangeable, and like words are really powerful, but words are also open to interpretation. So I think every company, every individual has a slight interpretation of the two. But I've been kind of chewing on it today because I wanted to get down to as a simpler explanation as I could get, and I like things to be simple. It helps me understand the world. So the two words that I got down to for quality assurance versus testing was one being more about prevention and the other one being more about a kind of cure. And that also is quite topical with COVID-19 going around. So I view quality assurance as some of the activities around helping prevent issues, bugs, risks from materializing in the case of the industry I work in software, and testing being activities that kind of lead you to a cure. So once something is built, you test it, maybe find some bugs, some issues, or highlight some risks, and then they get cured. And that's my summary.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Kev?
Right, I'm going to agree and slightly disagree with the two previous speakers. I think it's worth understanding that QA is a hell of a lot older than the computer industry. That King John appointed William de Wolfram to report on the quality of the British Navy. Samuel Pepys was given a job in the 17th century to oversee the quality of rations in the British Navy. So I think it's much better to define QA as the process of assuring quality, full stop, and that testing feeds into QA. It is a part of QA, but it is not necessarily the same thing. We need to get away from this idea that the QA aspect of testing is part of testing. Testing is part of QA, it's the other way round. I know that's probably quite controversial, but quality assurance starts with, it's so long ago, it goes through the Six Sigma revolution of the 1970s, and we're still not into computer software yet. So that's my view, that QA is the grand scheme of assuring quality, and testing is just part of that QA.
Okay, so you're agreeing with Rishi in the fact that you feel it's just a part of, well, not say just, but it is a part of QA.
Yes, but disagreeing that we should define it wholly as a software thing. It covers everything, and it's covered everything since what, King John, 12th century. That's 800 years of QA and what, 50 years of computer science as a profession.
Okay, thank you. Joanna?
Hi everyone, sorry, I just had a moment of cough, so apologies if I start again. I am Joanna Porkrashu. I'm head of quality engineering at Wolf Wizards. So we are a small fintech located in Midlands, offering financial automated advice. So it's some regulation behind the scenes as well. My opinion between basically what's testing and what's quality assurance, I do feel like each one of you already pinpointed quite good points regarding each one. I do see quality assurance, and personally, I'm going to speak mostly about the software development because this is where I have the expertise on a bit. So I see quality assurance as the whole process, as everyone already stated, the whole process where actually we're not looking only at validating or finding bugs or preventing bugs, basically looking at how we implement something or validating it's working as expected. But I do see quality assurance as taking the step back and looking at the whole processes, everything that we're doing to assure quality, full stop. Sorry about that. Testing, I see it, oh my God. I see it as a part of the quality assurance. So it's one activity from the whole thing. I can come back to it, but this is what happens with live, I guess.
Yeah, do you want to come back and have
Yes, definitely. Yeah,
thank you. Good idea. We don't want you to die on us. Don't want that on QA Babble's record. Any deaths? Ian, do you want to shoot?
Yeah, surely. Thanks very much. My name is Ian McGrantham. I'm a senior QA consultant, as I call myself now. Having looked around the job market a lot lately, I see very much where Kevin's coming from, and it is worth remembering. But my own take on it is, while we're talking about what QA and what test is, it's a question of not what I think, but so much how is it being used, and maybe what I think in terms of how it's being used. And what I can see is, for example, you've got certification standards for manufacturing. Those are quality assurance benchmarks that need to be met. So clearly it's not just testing, but in that sense, some form of testing would be needed to prove that it met the standard. So in a sense, yeah, very clearly quality assurance is serviced by test in that respect. On the other hand, I agree again with Ioana in the sense that quality assurance for me is much more about how do we get something delivered in a way that is effective and efficient, makes everyone as happy as possible, and fulfills the requirements. So those are your marks of quality, and again, test services that. But then again, exploratory testing and UI and user acceptance testing, you might regard that as, well, you're looking for bugs. You're not necessarily looking to meet a quality target. Obviously, you're going to improve quality, but you're looking to find things. You're looking to break something. And that's not necessarily within the context of quality assurance. You're going to improve the quality of the product, hopefully. But you might find a bug that is not related to your objectives, but is in itself critical in another way. So I would say that there's enough fluidity for different people to use those terms interchangeably or see them as quite independent and different. And the most important thing is to be able to frame the context that you're using them in and agree when you get started. So it makes sense for me to say, right, okay, well let's see if we can find a way of saying, right, this is what we mean by quality, this is what we mean by testing, these are where the Venn diagram marry, and these are the bits that sit outside.
Right. I like that point where the two marry. And it's where I live. I forgot to explain who I am. I'm an SDET lead. I get brought in by companies who need their SDETs teaching to be better. I often get brought in to improve the quality of unit testing, for example, or to build frameworks for API testing, or any number of things. And I think that Venn diagram you're talking about there, Ian, that overlap is where I live. That I am quality assurance in my regression testing, but I am not quality assurance. I am testing in my manual processes. And I think that that's worth seeing as two separate parts of testing, to separate the two apart, to not confuse them. One assures that quality has not diminished. The other has a quantitative effect on improving quality. And I like the fact that also you mentioned certification, that you buy a car, it's certified. You buy a plane, it's certified. You buy a hoverboard, it's certified. You buy a piece of software, there is no official certification, and there should be. So I appreciate that point of yours.
Thank you.
Ioana, are you okay? Do you want to?
Yeah, apologies. This is what happens with live, I guess. I don't know exactly what happened. Yeah, I think if you understood what I said, I think I covered really, really briefly. And as I mentioned, the colleagues already covered quite similar patterns.
No, I agree. I think we've covered that. The next question that I had written down was, is there a scenario where a business can employ both a test engineer and a QA engineer? And before I go round on this question, I did a little bit of research before we started today on the call, and looked at some of your LinkedIn profiles. So we've got five QA engineers or test engineers on the call, and with the exception of one, you've all at some point in your careers defined yourself as a test engineer or analyst, and then later on or before as a QA engineer or analyst, which I thought was quite interesting. And as we go around and answer this question, if you wouldn't mind, it'd be interesting to know whether that was a conscious thought on your side, or whether it was just symptomatic of maybe where the industry's gone with assuring quality. Because from what I can see, certainly in the market, you don't really see people being called a test engineer anymore. So there's been more of a transition towards quality. And, you know, did you think about that when you were when you write your CV, or is that just really more of a natural thing now because of where we've got to? Does someone want to kick off with this question?
I can say something very simply, actually. I initially had a systems analyst and analyst programmer background back in the late 80s, early 90s. And I actually started specifically testing in the early noughties. And what I've found is that as I have acquired more and more experience in terms of testing, and as I have been through processes where I have performed that function, I've found it necessary more and more to try and cover what is surrounded around the delivery of the test process, because you're always improving, you're always trying to make things better. And I think that's fundamentally what drives a tester, or at least it drives me anyway. I mean, some testers just like to break things, and they're great too, but making things better was something that really drove me. And so I found I was more engaged in the conversations around delivering the product than just writing a test script or doing test analysis or bug tracking and defect management. It was more about, well, how can we do this better? Why aren't we talking to the right people? Why didn't you as a product owner have that conversation with the development team earlier? So it became pretty evident to me that I was delivering concerns around how to deliver quality, not just testing. And the testing itself, when it came, was an affirmation of the agreements about what we said we were going to deliver, and a check to make sure that we hadn't broken anything that we'd already delivered, or we hadn't created a cul-de-sac for future delivery as well. And so, you know, that's why I was always puzzled a little bit, because test analysts seem to be regarded quite lowly on the pay scale, and then testers and test engineers seem to go upwards a little bit, and then you've got QA and senior test managers and senior test leads. Whereas to me, if you can execute a test, but unless you're an analyst, you can't define, understand, and challenge the value of the test. So that's kind of my take on it, actually, and a little bit more. Hope I haven't bored you.
No, that's good. So really for you, it's would you say it was like a natural progression as you got more experience of working in IT? You realised that you had the opportunity to do more than just test, that you could actually look at the quality of more than maybe just one thing or one area.
Definitely, and the earlier I could get to actually challenge the highest level of stakeholder I could, the more confident I felt that we were going to deliver the right thing. And the more confident, incidentally, the stakeholders felt that there was somebody there conscious of what they wanted and trying to meet those objectives. And quite often it wasn't just, I want this great product that does this and the other. It's like, okay, there's someone there who understands what I need, and if things do go wrong, can negotiate a way to mitigate and plan for the next release, and so on and so forth. So it's an ongoing process, engaged with the stakeholders to get the best product out and keep it going. And the more you do testing, the more you go through that analysis process, you know, the wider your scope of that gets until you reach that level.
Okay, thanks for that. Anyone else want to pick this one up?
I wouldn't mind, and everybody's probably got used to me talking by now, and you know I talk a lot. I think that the problem with the definition of QA in the software industry is that we forget that it shouldn't just be on the software. We tend to throw this QA engineer title in there, get someone to do something on the software, and that'll do. And actually, QA needs to go all the way up to the board. There needs someone to be doing quality assurance on the CTO and the CEO and the CFO. There needs to be someone doing quality assurance for the head of department. There needs to be someone doing, and so on down the structure, so that the quality assurance on the software is just part and parcel of quality assurance for the whole company.
Absolutely.
I mentioned it earlier, that I think that this test analyst is an underrated role, but I think QA is completely misused as a role title. And I know I've got it all over my CV. And the moment it goes out of fashion, I will remove it. It used to say tester. Now it says QA. I've just put the job that's common right now. Because I don't think that's what it is. That said, anybody that is able to do proper QA, is able to walk into a board meeting and go, wait a minute, the notes being taken are minimal. That's why decisions are being confused from the board. And instituting better note taking, for example, that's an act of QA. It's not an act of testing. So to Matt's question, which is there a role for a QA in a company and a tester? Hell yeah. Does the QA need to be a tester? Not in all circumstances, but a QA that can be a tester is useful. But a QA that's prepared to change process and procedure and can redo a swim lane diagram or reorganize a way meeting goes is worth its weight in gold in a way that I don't think a QA engineer ever would be.
Totally
again, controversial.
No, that would perfect sense.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I appreciate that, Kev. It was very honest of you about the whole sort of your own sort of job title thing. Do you think that because you said you essentially go with what the fashion is for what you call yourself? Is that right?
Yeah, that's why I'm an SDEP now, because that's the big fashion. But I like to actually own that title. I am a software development engineer. I do know how to do MVC sites and swing sites. I do know how to do code in 6 different programming languages. I can build software, but I prefer to write tests because it gives me a kick.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else want to go?
I think I've got a kind of very similar perspective. So I enjoy product delivery more than say just testing. And if you saw my LinkedIn profile, I've been a test engineer, test lead, test whatever, purely because that's the job title I was given internally by the company that I was employed by at the time. But now being fortunate enough to be able to call myself whatever I like, then I'll go with QA, etc. So that's it's an interesting, so it's a very broad conversation with regards to QA, and I like all the points and agree with all the points. And I do think it's open to interpretation. So this is where, say, if QA can be applied in a software testing context, or QA can be applied in the broader context, right? In the case of, say, someone, a company delivering software or running a financial services company right up to CEO board level. But then are there different departments, such as a PMO or such as the board itself, which is a board's job is to hold the people running the company, the directors, accountable for decisions that are made? Are they the board, in effect, in my understanding of what a board is anyway, is like a quality assurance function or thing, right? So founders, directors employ a board to make sure that they're running the company in the right way, financially, ethically, meeting regulation, all that kind of stuff. So I think then there are perhaps various different departments or job titles or job families that are responsible for QA, perhaps certainly in bigger companies.
I don't think that's wrong at all. I think that's a good example. But then what you have is your test QA, your management QA, your accounting QA, and they are all separate, and they probably shouldn't be. They probably should be talking to each other.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
And that is a big break. I mean, one of the things about SAFE, which is possibly bringing on to the third question shortly, is that the whole thing is about ensuring the best possible quality in scaled agile delivery. And in its definition, it has people doing QA at different roles, not always a tester in a team. Sometimes it will be a release train engineer has to make sure that everything is ready to go. Sometimes you have someone at a higher level that's combining the release trains that needs to have a QA overview. The problem is, and I've noticed this almost everywhere I've worked, those QAs do not communicate, especially not with the test QAs.
Yeah.
They might talk to each other, but they don't talk to the software department.
Always left out.
See, this is where I definitely agree with that, because essentially there's a communications key, because if there's a break in communication between the testers and the QAs, then things can slip through the net, essentially. So for example, say if you think about it from a test perspective, so from a tester's perspective, so you've got a deployed environment and you're testing against a particular application or software or even a data warehouse. You're kind of tested against it, and you found loads of bugs, you've had them fixed, you've retested, and then yeah, okay, cool, that seems like it's in a good place to go live, right? So we go to the next stage, you do some more regression testing there, and yeah, fingers crossed we find no more bugs. Absolutely brilliant, we're good to go. But if there's a kind of a gap in communication between the assurance, you're essentially your quality assurance person and your tester, then things slip through the net. So and a good example that I've actually been a part of is essentially the testing aspect of it. We found some bugs and we resolved them, and everything looked hunky-dory. However, as part of the release process, there's certain steps that need to take place, and as a tester, me doing hands-on testing on a daily basis, I don't understand the release, the individual deployment that takes place to release a particular piece of software. So from an assurance perspective, I know exactly what's happening there. So if a particular step's not taken place or executed correctly, all of a sudden there's an underlying issue that will happen when you go live, which if there's a break in communication will get missed and you will go live with an issue. And funny enough, I've actually had this exact issue at one of the companies that I worked for previously, and I raised this issue from an assurance perspective, saying there's going to be a failure in the system because this has not been deployed correctly, and there's an impact of X, Y, and Z. And there was a big hoo-ha, and we went into it, and it was, oh no, that's going to be absolutely fine, it will be absolutely fine. It's like, no, there's definitely not, it's not going to be fine. And this is where the kind of role of a QA sometimes gets ignored, right? Where people think it's been tested, it's been signed off, it's fine, and they go live with this kind of stuff. And this is where, in this particular case, they went live with an issue, and the next morning I walked into work, and everyone said, yeah, there's absolutely no issues here. And I was like, this is not right. and I've gone in and I've sat down with a developer, and we've gone down through the actual deployment process and said, right, this has not worked. Why is it still, what's going on here? We're going to the underlying details of it and find out actually something was deployed incorrectly, and there is a knock-on impact for it. You just don't know about it yet. And when we've actually gone into the details of that, in this particular case, obviously not talking about the actual names of the companies I worked for at the time, but we had to drop the production platform because it was a huge underlying issue. And this is where it's a perfect example of a break in communication between an assurance and a tester. Yeah. That's just one example, and I felt quite passionate about that particular one, because when companies especially don't understand the difference and don't kind of respect the break in communication and what quality assurance engineers and also testers have to say. This is what happens when companies go live with that kind of assumption of, yes, it's fine, we've checked the box of testing, it's good to go. Checking the box of testing doesn't necessarily mean it's good to go live, and that's kind of the big thing for me.
That's if I may, that's sparked two thoughts in my head. One is the feedback when you are a customer to a third-party supplier and you're involved in the overall delivery of a series of platforms, for example. If their deployment processes are tardy or they're prone to failure, then again, you're absolutely right. Testing that everything works fine doesn't really prove anything. You've got a quality issue in terms of the delivery process and the implementation process. And unless you acknowledge the need for quality feedback, you're not going to get anywhere, and you're going to continue to cost the client money to the point where they'll be like, oh, we're going to penalize you in the contract. So that was one thing it sparked off. Another thing that sparked off for me was the point about functions talking between themselves. You can be if you're a siloed quality assurance process and tester and product team and all the rest of it, and you deliver a product, you find bugs, you solve 100% of the bugs, and then you go on to implement, or you go on to performance test. Now, it might well be the first round of release, your performance test was 50% within the parameters that were required by the system. It's working great. It's fantastic. Wow, nice. Okay, now let's fix all the bugs. But what you didn't do was then liaise between the performance testing team and their quality targets and the functional team and their delivery. All the bugs got fixed, but your performance decayed so that you're actually now 50% beyond your performance target. So the quality conversation isn't just about fixing bugs and getting things going as fast as you can. It's that it's an opportunity to say, right, where do we agree the compromises? What is good enough? And good enough is a quality evaluation in terms of what we are delivering against what our aspirations are and what is pragmatic. So again, that is it's a higher function. It also happens to be a quality discussion. And unless you acknowledge, again, if you don't think about quality, you just think about delivery and test, that's a huge gap. You miss things like that and you get into trouble as a result.
That's why a test lead always needs to have the senior DevOps engineer as his best or her best friend. Because
doesn't it?
Oh, please, Karen.
No, it's okay. You finish.
I was just saying that the DevOps engineer has to be the best friend of the tester, because without that we can't deploy properly without being able to quality assure that part. But back over to Joanna. I was just saying,
So I wanted to actually be the devil's advocate into this, and why not? Actually, I do feel like the tester needs to be BFFs, basically best friends with absolutely everyone. So starting from the business, trying to understand what's the value that we're trying to deliver, because at the end of the day, this is the most this is the quality that we need to deliver at the end, is value to our customers. And then that value should be down basically throughout all the teams, and actually trying to have the same goal across all the teams. It's going to bring us into the same journeys, because if we are silos, if there are silos and each one of us has their own quality attributes and our own targets, we're going to try to achieve them, but we're not going to, with the best intentions, we're not going to care as much about the others at one point. But then if the tester is at the center of it all, thinking about the quality from a user perspective, then it can see how how the relationship with the other departments and how everyone is working, so that they can drive quality from the beginning till the end, till it's available to customer. I don't know if it makes sense. This is something actually that we're currently trialing into our teams, because to put even more, I don't know, confusion to the discussion, I guess, we actually changed our names to our chapter recently, a couple of months ago, from quality assurance engineers to quality engineers, because we wanted to put even more. We wanted to highlight even more that assuring quality is everyone's responsibility. Everyone, as someone, I think someone already mentioned, from the top till all the engineers, basically everyone in the delivery teams, and it's focusing on the entire analysis, I don't know, delivery, building, releasing, because as Rishi mentioned, releasing is really important as well. And we all have the same, I don't know, the same goal at the end of the day. At least that's how we're trying, I guess, to push forward this idea. And we don't have testers. So coming back to Matt's question, initial question, we don't have testers, but we do have quality engineers, and they are supporting the delivery teams. Engineers are doing their own testing with the support, with the expertise from the quality engineers. But we were in discussions, for example, if we're going to scale, we might need to think about what's the best way of using our time, and then actually maybe we want to consider hiring testers and having their expertise only focusing on preventing bugs, basically focusing on the build pipeline, and then the quality engineers can focus more into taking that step back basically and looking at the entire delivery process, discovery, release process, and how all as a group basically can improve it. I don't know if it makes sense.
It makes sense to me. So you're saying that if you do come to scale, you might potentially separate out the quality roles and have some people looking after the whole of quality, and as you said, sitting back, and then other people who are doing something more specific around actual
testing itself, the activity of testing, because testing, you can test, I don't know, even by asking questions. So just being there with the team and focusing on the implementation, on the delivery side, it takes a lot of time. So then you can have other people focusing. So as we have as that's QA automation, for example, so focusing on tools, on processes that can support the team to be even more efficient and productive. So creating the tooling and the processes that can help fasten the release process, so on and so forth. So basically trying to separate the responsibilities a bit so you can have that expertise, because even testing, you have functional testing, performance testing, exploratory testing. So there are so many things you can do. It's too much for just one engineer basically to have all these responsibilities.
It sounds like with this sort of scaled QA role, you're talking about having a quality assurance SME, a subject matter expert for quality assurance.
Yeah, more or less, I guess.
Which is absolutely the right solution, I think. Someone who's good at explaining how quality fails and how quality succeeds doesn't necessarily need to be from your own environment. Okay, it's good if you are having advice from someone who knows software and you are a software tester. But the general processes of making sure that quality assurance is done, as I say, they're 800 years old. They predate us by 750 years. There's got to be a way you can get subject matter expertise at that higher level that feeds into people taking responsibility for their own quality assurance.
If I may, I'll throw what was actually the sort of final point really into the mix, and that's concerning Agile. So I've tried to pick up on some of the language that we've been using when we've been talking about the difference between testing and quality assurance over the last half an hour. And so someone said the word checking, and I think Ian mentioned about having testers who are potentially siloed, he used the word. Do we think that Agile has changed or shifted our focus away from people who previously were just testers or maybe checkers to someone who's got more of an overarching look at the whole of quality around a project or process? Is Agile moved us on? Is that why we're now primarily using the word quality rather than testing?
No one else is jumping forward, so I will.
You start off, mate, and I'm sure others will.
Yeah. I think that Agile has done two things. One is positive. It stopped us being siloed as a test team and made us more technical. However, it's also broken our communication as testers and as QA professionals, because now we're siloed inside a team with other developers and not making enough of an effort in most companies to communicate with the other QAs, the other testers. Now, people who've done SAFe, they've already got that. People who do the Spotify model, they've already got that. But these are all fixes to the Agile Scrum definition that probably weren't considered when they designed Agile Scrum.
So you think, sorry to interrupt, but do you think that maybe because we've moved away from having sort of people who sit in particular boxes, so your testers and your developers, and now we've got our Agile teams where we've maybe got 2 or 3 software engineers versus 1 tester in a team? Do you think that's meant that they're sometimes dominated by engineers? And I know there's things like, you know, communities of practice that companies have got to kind of bring QAs together.
What I'd say to you, Matt, is can you ever imagine a developer dominating me? No. So there you go.
More individuals. Yeah.
No, what I actually meant was now they're a member of the engineering team, which means that they're talking engineering. They're becoming more engineering based, engineering focused. What they're missing is those conversations in the testing room that we used to have 20, 30 years ago that were informative as to how to move forward. Now, good companies have put something in to replace that. Bad ones have actually siloed their testers again. Only this time they've siloed them away from other assurance personnel and siloed them with developers. The question is how you put something on top of Agile to make Scrum give us the benefit of the QA conversations and the developer conversations that used to happen in bad old waterfall days. And I think we have lost something. Yes, we've got more technical, the software is a lot better, believe me. In my 30 years in the industry, I've watched software just get so much better. I remember working for 5 years without the product going out of the door in waterfall. And it's just insane when you think that, you know, you can do monthly updates, or even one company I worked for down in London, weekly updates to the website. You know, weekly sprints, getting that website going. You could have never have done that before, but you are breaking down those conversations that you would have had during that process. And I don't think we ever fixed that. I think we went, let's get rid of that. It doesn't work. Let's do something new. And we didn't go, what did work out of that? And I think we're guilty of that because we're a new industry. We think we can just chuck away the old stuff. And actually, we've got to keep some of it.
That's an interesting point that I hadn't thought about, but I'm inclined to agree. Not 100%, because that would be silly. But
we need to debate, right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, please. But what I would say was moving into a team that actively was trying to implement Agile as in its principles as best it could, including incrementally doing what they think they needed to do to apply the Agile methodologies that they chose. It made me realize I was doing a lot of things for a long time that were being advocated. And in a sense, it was giving me a kind of an affirmation that the role I was taking of looking beyond the test and looking beyond the delivery, try and understand the environment, the scope, the actors, the stakeholders, that actually has an opportunity to have a voice in agile methodology. Just the mere fact that you've got a product owner, a tester, and a developer in Three Amigos, it's like, well, it's a tacit admission of the fact that one pair of eyes is not nearly as good as three pairs of eyes and three different mindsets. That said, I do actually agree with what you're saying about having lost the test community. And again, when I've been in a lot of contracts where no one ever gave two monkeys about the test community, to be quite honest. But the interesting thing about being in this company where they really wanted to implement Agile was they were actually quite worried about the test community. So there must have been some tacit concession that, well, we might be implementing Agile within the teams, but we need to be able to reach out beyond the teams for the test function to feel like it's got a home.
And how did they do that, Ian?
Worrying about having a home is something that's new. I think there's always been a bit of a worry as testers that, well, we're kind of being treated slightly as an appendage, and we need friends to talk to.
How did they actually do that then? How did they encourage a community to bond?
They were trying to run sessions within the company and trying to establish, for example, a tester's Slack, and not just within the team, but at a broader level. And they found it hard to do, to be fair, because it didn't fit in with the goals and objectives of the individual delivery teams.
I've seen exactly the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, you almost, I think, exactly like you said, Kevin, you end up trading one silo for another, and like you just said, Ian. And I think I've either read somewhere or listened to a podcast once that is almost inevitable, maybe due to our makeup. Like, we can only do so much work in a day, and we can only hold so many relationships. And like to your point, a testing team has a different objective to, or a quality assurance team maybe has slightly different objectives and goals to a product delivery team. But I like to think in the purest sense, on paper, if you have an agile team that is a proper product team, not necessarily a project team, then I think on paper that should encourage that team to be responsible for quality, and should be really responsible from the product, from its inception to delivery, to managing it in production, to decommission, to it right through the whole life cycle, responsible for it delivering its against its value proposition. So the kind of broader, the broader business case, or the business model canvas. But of course, there are very few and far between teams doing kind of that purist Scrum, or being a purist product team versus a project team. Because every company's like to do 6 monthly or yearly budgets, and to do that you have to build forecasts, and to build a forecast you have to say how long things are going to take in each phase of the delivery. Even if you try and be agile underneath it, it's normally wrapped in a sort of waterfall budgeting thing for which even in the background people are.
Which is why I will push you towards having a look at SAFE.
Okay, I should.
Agileframework.com, because it's well worth a look. I'm sure I'll get plaudits for having got qualified for pushing other people to go read. So,
are you getting a kickback for that?
Oh, I don't know. I hope someone smiles at me next time I have to go and I don't know, what are we now? SAFE 5. When we get to SAFE 6, I'll need to retake it all. So, but it is worth a look for those of you that have struggled with this. I think SAFE has some solutions. I think you have to adapt their solution a little. But the budgeting, the idea of agile budgets, that's insane. So it's worth a look. It may actually be the thing that makes the whole of the company go agile. And I think their big test case was John Deere. you know, America's equivalent to JCB. They went and did this completely, and now they've kind of doubled their software output, which is kind of cool. But anyway, that's just me saying you appear to be describing this, so yeah. Please have a look into it.
Thank you.
I was going to say, so from my opinion, I tend to agree with you guys. With the essential, when people used to follow the kind of the waterfall methodology and have kind of a group of testers where essentially people could kind of work together and kind of bounce ideas off each other when testing a product and looking at the overall quality of the system under test. It was a nice community, and you had people you could bounce ideas off and you know, look at the ways that you're approaching testing, because you know everyone has a slightly different mindset. So and I think in the agile world, and this is where my opinion is, where roles have constantly changed names, is when people are hiring people in regards to an assurance side of stuff, they want someone that can do everything, and they want that person embedded within a Scrum team. And this is where testers essentially are struggling, because what they're having to do is go and upsell themselves in a role where they're doing an assurance and a testing role, where necessarily they might not have the experience to do both. And they're kind of over the years, they're slowly embedding into these Scrum teams and trying to get to grips with doing the testing side of it, or the assurance side of it, or trying to, you know, do a bit of both. And not having that kind of center of community is essentially the biggest missing piece. And a lot of, you know, you see that in all firms at the moment, or well, not all, most firms have that at the moment, where you have people that essentially are in roles where they're a specialist in a certain area, but they need time to upskill in a different area. So when you put people in a Scrum team where you have X amount of developers and an X amount of testers, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to, you know, be able to cover all aspects, because they don't necessarily have that experience. I mean, you know, my company I'm working at the moment, BGSS, I mean, you do have a really good function where we have Scrum teams working on various different projects, but then we also have a capability. So a kind of testing and assurance capability. So we have a community within BGSS where essentially, if I don't, so for example's sake, if I didn't understand, you know, let's say some non-functional testing. So if from an actual testing perspective, if I didn't understand, you know, accessibility testing, if I'm not your expert in that, then essentially I've got people that I can reach out to. I've got a community I can go to and say, does anyone have any experience in this particular sector of testing? And I'll go and reach out to that particular person and have a conversation with them to understand the best way to approach something from a testing perspective. And there's also people from an assurance side of stuff that I can go to and say, from an assurance standpoint, what kind of things would I be looking at? So that kind of helps me as a tester or a quality engineer upskill and be able to provide the best value to a client within a Scrum team, if that makes sense. So that's kind of my opinion of where we were and where we are now, and how essentially companies can kind of create that kind of capability function within the organization that helps testers have that community and forum to go to and talk to each other.
Yeah, I've heard of quite a lot of companies do that with some success, actually. I think a lot of it boils down to the fact that it's testers and quality assurance people have their very identity has had to change as IT's changed over the last 20 years or so. Whereas if you're a developer, it's probably a bit more straightforward. You are essentially a software engineer, you're a developer, but testing's had to adapt quite a lot, particularly with the way that Agile's sort of overtaken or taken over everything. And
funnily enough, I think development's gone the other way. We've now become different types of tester, but developers are now being expected to be a full stack. Whereas before you'd have a DBA and you'd have a front end guy and a middle tier guy. Now you've got to do all of them as a developer. But like Rishi was saying, I don't know anything about accessibility guidelines. Who's the accessibility guy? That's not what you're expecting from developers now. So it's a weird thing. I think, in a few years' time, we're going to have developers complaining about how they've been siloed.
And the testers look on with a devious smile. Yeah. I'm gonna wrap it up there because I think potentially people could talk for longer, and I'm hopefully you've all enjoyed our discussion. So thank you very much for joining in. I'm going to take us off YouTube now.